This is the actor Joel Albert McCrea. His career spanned almost 5 decades and appeared in more than 87 films. Producer Harry Sherman said of Joel McCrea that Joel is the greatest natural Western star since the old days of Tom Mix and William S. Hart. He has an authentic background and is one of the finest natural horsemen I've ever seen. Just a guy who knows how to set a horse with grace and authority. In a 1978 interview, McCrea said, "I like doing comedies, but as I get older, I was better suited to do westerns. I think it becomes unattractive for an older feller trying to look young and falling in love with attractive young girls. The minute I get on a horse, a hat, and a pair of cowboy boots, I felt easier. I didn't feel like an actor anymore. I felt like a guy just out there getting it done." Joel McCrea was born November the 5th, 1905 in South Pasadena, California. His parents was Thomas and Louise McCrea. Thomas worked as an executive for the Los Angeles Gas and Electric Company. Joel's mother, Louisa Whipple McCrea, was a professional Christian Science practitioner. His maternal grandfather, Albert Whipple, was one of the original 49ers that came to California in a covered wagon to search for gold during the 1849 gold rush. Joel's paternal grandfather, Major John McCrea, had been an Indian fighter and a stagecoach driver from San Bernardino to Los Angeles. Joel had one older sister, Lois Whipple McCrea, born January the 9th, 1899, and one older brother, John McCrea III, born 1902. In 1914, when Joel was 9 years old, the family moved from Pasadena to 7755 Hollywood Boulevard in Los Angeles. He said he guessed his Scottish heritage made him a good business person. He said his first business deal was with his mother. He said he invested in chickens, sold her the eggs, she cooked them, and he said, "I ate them." Like a lot of boys at his age, Joel got a paper route with the Los Angeles Times. It just so happened that a lot of his customers was Hollywood moguls like Sam Goldwyn, Wallace Reed, and cowboy star William S. Hart. He said the paper route was good for him because it taught him not to be impressed with movie stars. Although some lived in million-dollar mansions and was supposed to have had millions, they sometimes had a hard time coming up with the 60 cents they owed me for the month's paper delivery. Young Joel became more impressed with the horses that they rode than the actors who rode them. He volunteered to become a horse holder for Tom Mix and William S. Hart, who he delivered newspapers to. And by the time he was 12, he was known by the crew for hanging around movie sets and watching. In 1917, silent star Ruth Rowland was making a western with her leading man, who was scared to death of horses. So they dressed McCrea up in buckskin and put him on a horse. He got to be in a couple of shots, he said, and they paid him $5. He changed his mind about wanting to be a cowboy and decided to become an actor. Joel attended Hollywood High School, and during summer when school was out, he'd work as a cowboy on one of the local ranches. He said to be a real cowboy, the first thing you got to learn is a horse gets up on its front feet and a cow gets up on its back feet. He once got all tangled up in his rope trying to get a cow up by pulling the front part of the cow with a rope around his saddle horn. He said where a cowboy goes behind the cow, grabs the tail, and pulls it up on its hind legs. After graduating from high school, Joel studied acting at Pomona College, and he got some stage experience at the Pasadena Community Playhouse. He had lived around movie making most of his life growing up and was doing stunt work even in high school. In 1928, when Joel graduated college, he had already been in silent movies as an extra, in such as The Fair Coed in 1927 with Marion Davies and Johnny McBrown. Joel was one of the unaccredited students. In 1928, he'll get a part in The 5 O'Clock Girl, that again starring Marion Davies. The picture was supposed to be the first talkies that Davies was in, where she was supposed to sing 3 songs. However, after having so much trouble with the new sound equipment, they went back to the silent film, and the film was shelved almost 3 weeks later. In 1930, Joel began getting real roles like The Silver Horde, about the salmon fishing in Alaska. About this time, he left MGM and went to RKO. He was making enough money to move the family to this house at 243 South Rockingham Avenue in Los Angeles. In 1932, Joel will be in Bird of Paradise, directed by King Vidor, and his co-star was Dolores Del Rio, who at the time was a major star with a $5,000 salary, where McCrea was only making $500. The movie made a stir from its semi-nude scenes. On the 20th of October 1933, Joel McCrea married actress Frances D. They'd first met at the beach where he was playing volleyball and she was doing a photo shoot. Her photographer asked him if he wanted to be in the picture. Later he said that he was unshaven and had pulled up beside her at a red light and gave her a nod. She turned, stuck her nose up in the air, and drove off, he said. The third time they met was on the set of The Silver Cord with Irene Dunne and Frances D. The movie was about a domineering matriarch that works to sabotage her son's new marriage. After marrying Frances, Joel began taking advice from Oklahoma humorist Will Rogers, who told him to save half of everything he made and put his money into buying land. He took the advice and bought 1,000 acres in a then unincorporated area of eastern Ventura County, which is now Thousand Oaks. He'll eventually increase it to 3,000-acre ranch, which McCrea and his wife Frances lived and will raise their family and ride their horses. Joel considered himself to be a full-time rancher and a part-time actor. He was visited once by the IRS and asked why did he claim to be a rancher instead of an actor. He stuck his hands out and said, "Do you think that these calluses comes from ranching or acting?" He said they never bothered him again. The next year, in 1934, Joel and Frances D. will have a son they named Jody. Jody will become an actor in later life, appearing in his dad's movies, and he's probably best known for the slow-minded deadhead in the movie Beach Party with Annette Funicello and Frankie Avalon. Jody was married to Dusty Ironwing and raised her 3 children as his own. He passed away in 2009 from heart trouble at the age of 74 while ranching in Roswell, New Mexico. The next year, in 1935, after Jody's birth, the McCreas will have a second son, David. David will marry Jan Johnson, and they will have 3 children. He will become a rancher like his dad. When Jan passed away from cancer, David married Lorraine Johnson, and they had 2 children. Lorraine will pass away after a car accident in 2004. He'll then marry Lorella Marley. They'll remain married until David's death on the 13th of November 2020 at the age of 85, also in Roswell. One of David's sons, White, oversees the ranch and land owned by his granddad and works to keep his granddaddy's memory alive. In 1928, Joel met the famous Wyatt Earp on a studio lot and was impressed by the old lawman. I suspect his grandson White was named after the real Wyatt Earp. In 1937, Joel McCrea will play the first Dr. Kildare in films, Interns Can't Make Money. Also the same year, Joel will star with his wife Frances D. in a Western, Fargo, where McCrea works for the Wells Fargo and Company. In 1939, Joel will star in another Western, Union Pacific, with Barbara Stanwyck, about the building of the Union Pacific Railroad across the West. In 1941, McCrea will co-star with Veronica Lake in Sullivan's Travels, where a Hollywood director sets out to experience life as a poor, homeless person so that he can better direct his next film. Joel never received an Academy Award, but most of Hollywood felt that he should have won one for Sullivan's Travels. In 1942, Joel will star in two William Wellman's westerns. First, The Great Man's Lady with Barbara Stanwyck. Next, it'll be Buffalo Bill with a young Maureen O'Hara. In 1946, Joel will star in The Virginian with Barbara Britton. The Virginian was such a success that McCrea decided to do only westerns. Joel and Frances had made such a success out of their ranching and real estate, he could now pick the pictures he enjoyed doing, and that was westerns. In 1950, he will star with Ellen Drew in Stars in My Crown, where a Southern congregation finds the strength to lay down their arms and rebuild their lives after the Civil War. This is one of McCrea's most enduring films and is still being watched today. The director was Jacques Tourneur, that happened to be a high school classmate of Joel's. In 1951 and 52, Joel was the voice of Jace Pearson on NBC's radio network. It was a reenactment of actual Texas Ranger case files called The Tales of the Texas Rangers, always with his favorite horse, Charcoal. It's believed that in 1951, Joel and Frances separated but never divorced. During this separation, a child was born, Monica Lee McCrea, who will become an actress, writer, and recording artist. Now this is Monica and her younger brother Peter, who was born in 1955 after Joel and Frances reconciled. Peter is a real estate developer and married Courtney Lemon, Jack Lemon's daughter, in 2001. Peter is now the only surviving son of Joel and Frances McCrea. The same year Peter was born, Joel starred with Vera Miles in Wichita, a movie about Wyatt Earp. He had known the real Wyatt Earp, and now here he was playing him in movies. 2 years later, in 1958, Joel will lose his sister, Lois Whipple McCrea Ramsey Caldwell, on July the 18th, 1958, at the age of 59. The next year, in 1959, Joel and his oldest son, Jody, will star together in an NBC TV series, Wichita Town. It'll be 26 episodes, with Joel as Marshal Mike Dunbar and Jody as one of his deputies. In 1962, Joel McCrea and Randolph Scott came together to make what they thought would be a final Western, directed by Sam Peckinpah, Ride the High Country, with Mariette Hartley. The critics gave bad reviews, which was a surprise to both McCrea and Scott. They said that they were just two old washed-up actors playing two old washed-up cowboys. Despite what the critics said, the public loved the movie and made it a classic. According to a well-known director, Joel McCrea, along with Ben Johnson, was considered to be the best horseman in Hollywood at that time. Ride the High Country was Randolph Scott's last movie, and McCrea will not make another one for 4 years. It was Mariette Hartley's first movie. In 1966, it'll be The Young Rounders, where he'll play with Slim Pickens as rodeo riders. Then in 1969, Joel will be inducted into the Western Performance Hall of Fame at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. The next year in 1970, it'll be Cry Blood Apache, again with his son Jody. We're there in a rare screen appearance together, where members of a gold expedition is stalked by an Indian warrior that wants to revenge the massacre of his tribe. In 1972, Joel will lose his older brother, John McCrea III, at the age of 70. In 1976, Joel comes out of retirement to star in his last movie, Mustang Country, where an old rodeo rider turns rancher tries to hunt down a wild Mustang with the help of an Indian boy. After Mustang Country, actor Joel McCrea will fully retire to his ranch, where he and Frances enjoyed family and ranch life. Frances D., through the years, maintained a lasting friendship with actress Katharine Hepburn. The McCreas ultimately donated several hundreds of acres to the city of Thousand Oaks, called the Joel McCrea Park. Her grandson, Wyatt, said that Frances wanted to see children playing on the land the way her boys did growing up. At the age of 84, Joel was taken to the Motion Picture and Television Hospital in Woodland Hills with breathing problems. After a short stay, on the 20th of October, 1990, on his and his beloved wife Frances D. McCrea's 57th wedding anniversary, Joel Albert McCrea passed away from pneumonia. His remains was scattered on the ranch that he loved. His star is on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, located on the north side of 6900 block of Hollywood Boulevard.